The morning sun was bright over Seoul when the ships came down from the sky. Captain Dae-ho Kim stood at his post in the Korean Space Defense Force Command Center, watching the huge silver vessels land in cities all around the world. His hands were steady on the controls, but his heart was beating fast. "Sir, we're getting reports from every major city," said Hayrin Park, his tactical officer. She was young but smart, and Dae-ho trusted her judgment. New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow, they're everywhere. The alien ships were beautiful in a way that made humans feel small. They were smooth and shiny like giant drops of mercury floating just above the ground. No weapons could be seen, no threatening moves were made. They just waited. Within hours, the aliens made contact. They spoke through devices that made their words sound perfect in every human language. The leader called himself Ambassador Veltar. He had 6 arms and skin that looked like polished stone. His voice was calm and friendly when he spoke to the United Nations. "People of Earth," Veltar said, "we are the Galactic Council. We have been watching your world for many years. You have grown much, but you are still young. We come to help you join the great family of worlds." Dae-ho watched the broadcast with millions of other humans. The alien's words sounded good, maybe too good. He had been a soldier for 15 years, and something felt wrong. "Your species shows great promise," the ambassador continued, "but you are dangerous to yourselves and others. You make war. You build weapons. You hurt your own planet. We can help you become better." The solution the aliens offered was simple. Earth would join the Galactic Council as a protected world. Humans would give up their armies and weapons. In return, they would receive knowledge, technology, and peace. The aliens would take care of everything. Most world leaders loved the idea. President Martinez of the United States smiled during his speech. Prime Minister Chen of China talked about a golden age for humanity. Even the Secretary General of the UN seemed excited about the future. But not everyone was happy. Dr. Soo-Jin Lee worked at Seoul National University, studying life from other worlds. The aliens had agreed to let human scientists examine them, and what she found worried her. When she scanned the aliens with her equipment, something strange appeared on her screens. "Look at this," she said to her assistant. "When I scan Ambassador Veltar, my machines show something I've never seen before. They mark humans as void-touched. What does that mean?" She tried to ask the alien scientists about it, but they always changed the subject. They smiled and said it was just a translation error. But Soo-Jin had studied alien languages for years. She knew when someone was lying. Meanwhile, in a secret base under the mountains, other things were happening. Colonel Woo-Jin Choi had served in the Korean Marines for 20 years. He was tough, smart, and loyal to his country. 3 days after the aliens arrived, he got a message that changed everything. The message was from General Park, his old commander. It had only a few words. "Project Haven is active. Prepare for deep insertion. Trust no one else." Woo-Jin had heard whispers about Project Haven for years. It was supposed to be a backup plan, something to use if Earth was ever invaded. But he never thought it was real. Now it seemed like someone had been planning for this day for a long time. As the weeks passed, more human governments signed the Terran Inclusion Pact. The document was long and full of difficult words, but the meaning was clear. Humans would give up their freedom to be safe. They would move to new worlds where the aliens could watch them and guide them. "This is the best thing that could happen to us," said the President of France on television. No more wars. No more hunger. No more fear. But Captain Deho was not so sure. He had been studying the alien ships with his sensors. What he found made his blood run cold. The ships had weapons. Lots of them. Weapons that could destroy entire cities with one shot. Why would peaceful visitors need such terrible things? "Hey, Rin," he said to his officer one night as they watched the ships in the sky. "What do you think about all this?" She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "My grandmother lived through the Japanese occupation. She always told me to be careful when powerful people say they want to help you. Sometimes help looks like a cage." The dismantling of human military forces began within a month. Soldiers all over the world were told to hand in their weapons and go home. Most did as they were ordered. But some, like Wu Jin, got different orders. One night, as the last Korean military units were being disbanded, Wu Jin met with 12 other soldiers in an abandoned warehouse. They were all tough men and women who had served their country well. "The aliens think they've won," Wu Jin told them. "They think humans are like every other species they've met, weak and easy to control. But they don't know us very well." He showed them a map of hidden bases around the world. Places the aliens didn't know about. Places where humans had been preparing for the worst. "Project Haven isn't just a backup plan," he said. "It's been active for 3 years. While the politicians were talking about peace, soldiers and scientists were getting ready for war. The aliens may have taken our official armies, but they haven't taken our spirit." Dr. Sujin made her most disturbing discovery 2 days before the first transport ships were supposed to arrive. She had been studying blood samples from human volunteers, comparing them to alien DNA. What she found would have scared anyone else, but it gave her hope. Human brains worked differently than any other species the aliens had met. Where other creatures showed patterns the aliens could read and control, humans showed chaos. Beautiful, creative, unpredictable chaos that the alien technology couldn't understand or influence. "We're immune," she whispered to herself in her empty lab. "Whatever they use to control other species, it won't work on us." She tried to contact the government, but no one would listen. Everyone was too excited about joining the galactic community. So she did something else. She sent her research to an encrypted address that Wu Jin had given her months ago. Within hours, she got a reply. "Pack light. Someone will come for you tonight." As the first transport ships landed in major cities around the world, most humans lined up willingly to begin their new lives among the stars. They believed they were going to paradise. They believed the aliens who said, "Trust us." But in the shadows, other humans were preparing for something very different. They had heard the same words before from other conquerors throughout history. And they remembered what happened to people who trusted too much. The galaxy thought it was getting another obedient species to add to its collection. Instead, it was about to meet something it had never seen before, humans who refused to be tamed. 6 months had passed since the transport ships took the first humans away from Earth. Yejin Nam stood in a field on the planet Kepler 442b, her hands bleeding from 10 hours of pulling weeds from alien crops. The sun here was smaller and redder than Earth's sun, and the air was thin enough to make her dizzy. She had been a police detective in Seoul before the aliens came. She was good at solving crimes and helping people. Now she was just another worker on a farm that stretched beyond. "The horizon! Move faster!" shouted the alien supervisor. It looked like a giant bug with too many eyes and a voice like grinding metal. "The quotas must be met, or there will be no food tonight." Yejin wanted to fight back, but she had learned what happened to humans who caused trouble. They disappeared. The aliens said they were sent to re-education centers, but no one ever came back from those places. Around her, other humans worked in silence. Men and women from every country on Earth, all doing the same mindless labor. Some had been doctors, or teachers or engineers. Now they were all just hands to do work the aliens didn't want to do themselves. At night, in the barracks where they slept, Yejin heard the stories. They were always the same, no matter which world the humans came from. The aliens had lied about everything. "They told us we'd be partners," whispered an old man who had been a professor. "They said we'd learn from each other and build a better future together." Instead, humans found themselves at the bottom of a system that had existed for thousands of years. They were the newest slave race in a galaxy full of slaves. The aliens called it shepherding, but it was just slavery with a nicer name. On the mining world of Proxima Centauri, Minho Seo was learning the same hard truth. He had been in Korean intelligence before the aliens came, trained to spot lies, and read people. Now he spent his days deep underground, digging rare metals out of rock with tools that barely worked. The alien overseers here were different than the ones on the farming worlds. They looked like walking skeletons covered in gray skin. They never spoke to the humans except to give orders or punishments. Minho had been watching and listening for months. He noticed patterns. The aliens were afraid of something. They talked in their own language when they thought humans couldn't hear, and Minho had learned enough of their words to understand some of it. They were worried about disruption fields and pattern corruption. They tested the human workers every week with strange devices, always looking concerned about the results. Whatever they were looking for, they weren't finding it, and that scared them. One night, Minho found a way to send a message to other work camps. It was dangerous, but he had to try. He used old equipment the aliens thought was broken to create a signal that couldn't be traced. "This is Minho from Mining Station 7, he transmitted into the darkness. "If anyone can hear this, we need to organize. The aliens are not what they seem. We are not safe. We need to fight back." The response came 3 days later, then more responses. Soon, Minho was in contact with humans on dozens of worlds. They all had the same story, promises of paradise that turned into lives of slavery. But some of the messages gave him hope. There were humans who had never been captured. Humans who were still free and planning something big. On the research station orbiting Titan 7, Ji-Hoon Yang was making discoveries that terrified him. He had been a quantum physicist on Earth, working on advanced computer systems. The aliens said they needed his help with research projects to benefit all species. What he found instead was a laboratory dedicated to studying human minds. The aliens were trying to figure out why their control systems didn't work on humans the way they worked on other species. "Look at these brain scans," his alien supervisor showed him. The creature looked like a jellyfish made of metal and glass. "Every other species shows clear neural pathways that respond to our guidance signals. But humans show only chaos." Ji-Hoon pretended to be interested in helping them solve this problem, but secretly he was learning everything he could about alien technology. What he discovered made his hands shake with anger. The entire galactic civilization was built on mind control. Every species except humans had been mentally enslaved by devices that made them obedient and predictable. The aliens called it psychic harmony, but it was just another kind of slavery. The ruling species, The ones who called themselves the Galactic Council had built their empire by taking away the free will of every other intelligent creature they met. They kept them docile and controlled, using them as workers, soldiers, or whatever else they needed. But humans were different. The same chaos in human brains that made them creative and unpredictable also made them immune to the control signals. Even worse for the aliens, humans seemed to disrupt the signals just by being near other controlled species. Ji-hoon started keeping notes, hiding them in places the aliens wouldn't look. He documented everything: how the control systems worked, what their weaknesses were, and most importantly, how humans could break them. Meanwhile, on a prison world called Tartarus 3, Hyun-woo Jang was seeing the darkest side of the alien empire. He had been a Korean Navy SEAL before the aliens came, trained for the most dangerous missions. Now he was a prisoner on a world where the aliens sent humans who asked too many questions. The prison was full of humans who had tried to resist or escape. But it also held members of other species, creatures the aliens said were mentally damaged and couldn't be helped. Hyun-woo spent weeks talking to these other prisoners, learning their stories. What he discovered changed everything he thought he knew about the galaxy. "We used to build great cities," said a creature that looked like a giant turtle with 6 legs. "We made art and music and explored the stars. Then the council came and said they would help us. After that, my people could only think simple thoughts and do simple tasks." The other prisoners had similar stories. They remembered bits and pieces of civilizations that had been destroyed not by war or disaster, but by the slow removal of intelligence and creativity. The aliens had been doing this for thousands of years, turning advanced species into obedient workers. "But some of us resist," the turtle creature continued. "Our minds are too broken for their control, but too strong to die. So they put us here and forget about us." Hyun-woo realized that the prison wasn't just for troublemakers. It was for anyone whose mind couldn't be properly controlled. And humans weren't the first species to resist. They were just the first who couldn't be broken. Back on the farming world, Ye-jin was getting ready to make her own form of resistance. She had been watching the alien supervisors, learning their routines and weaknesses. They were confident and lazy, used to dealing with obedient workers who never fought back. But Ye-jin was not obedient. She was angry. One night she slipped away from the barracks and found the communication center the aliens used to contact other worlds. The security was terrible because they never expected humans to be smart enough or brave enough to break in. She sent a message to every frequency she could find. "This is Ye-jin from Farm Colony 12. We are not guests here. We are slaves. The aliens lied to us. If you're listening, if you're free, please help us." The response came faster than she expected. It wasn't from another prisoner or another slave. It came from Earth's moon, from a transmitter that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. "This is Commander Tae-young Kang of Project Haven. We hear you. We're coming. Tell everyone to get ready." Ye-jin's hands shook as she realized what this meant. Not all humans had been captured. Somewhere out there, her people were still fighting, and they had been planning something big. She deleted all traces of her transmission and snuck back to the barracks, but she couldn't sleep. For the first time since the transport ships had taken her away from Earth, she felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. The aliens had made a terrible mistake. They thought humans were like every other species they had conquered: weak, easily controlled, and quick to give up. They had no idea that some humans had never surrendered at all. And now those humans were getting ready to remind the galaxy what happened when you tried to cage something that was born to be free. Bo-Ra Lim floated in the zero gravity of an abandoned asteroid mining station, her fingers dancing across screens that shouldn't have existed. For 2 years, she had been building something the aliens thought was impossible, a communication network that connected human resistance cells across 50 different worlds. Before the aliens came, Bo-Ra had been one of Korea's best cyber warfare specialists. She could break into any computer system and make it do things its creators never intended. Now she was using those same skills to build a network out of junk and determination. The asteroid station had been abandoned for decades, forgotten by the aliens who only cared about rich worlds with lots of resources. It was perfect for Bo-Ra's needs, hidden, ignored, and full of old equipment she could modify. Signal strength is good on all channels, she said to herself, watching data flow across her screens. Resistance cells on 47 worlds are now connected. Time to send the message. She typed carefully, knowing that this transmission could change everything. Project Haven was real. The cavalry is coming. Be ready to fight. The message went out instantly, traveling through hidden relays and forgotten satellites to reach humans who had been waiting for this moment. On mining worlds and farm colonies, in prison camps and research stations, humans received the signal and smiled for the first time in years. On Earth's moon, Commander Tae-Young Kang stood in a control room that the aliens had never found. Around him, hundreds of people worked at stations filled with equipment that was supposed to have been destroyed 3 years ago. The room hummed with activity as the most ambitious deception in human history reached its final stage. "Sir, we're receiving confirmation from all Haven sites," reported his communications officer. "The fleet is ready for activation." Tae-Young nodded. He was 50 years old, a career military officer who had spent the last 3 years living in secret bases and hidden facilities. When the aliens had demanded that Earth surrender its weapons, he had been one of the few who refused to believe their promises of peace. "How many ships do we have operational?" he asked. 237, sir. Not as many as we hoped, but each one is equipped with technology the aliens have never seen before. The ships of Project Haven had been built in secret over the past 3 years, constructed in hidden shipyards using resources the aliens thought had been destroyed. They were smaller than alien vessels, but faster and more maneuverable. Most importantly, they didn't rely on the same technology the rest of the galaxy used. Dr. Yoon-Soo Park entered the control room, carrying a tablet full of technical data. She had been a robotics professor at CAST before becoming one of Haven's chief engineers. Her white hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, but her eyes burned with the intensity of someone who had been working 20-hour days for years. The disruption field generators are ready," she announced. "We can now project human neural patterns across space itself. Any alien control system within range will be scrambled beyond repair." Tae-Young smiled grimly. The aliens had made their empire by controlling the minds of other species. They had never imagined that someone might be able to turn that control system against them. Back on the prison world of Tartarus III, Hyunwoo Jang was putting the finishing touches on his own plans. He had spent months studying the prison's security systems and learning the routines of the alien guards. Now he was ready to lead the biggest prison break in galactic history. "Listen carefully," he told the other human prisoners during their evening meal. "Tomorrow during the shift change, I'm going to cause a distraction. When you see the lights go out, head for the exit points we've discussed. Don't try to be heroes. Just get out and get to the landing pad." One of the prisoners, a young woman who had been a teacher on Earth, looked worried. "What about the other species? The ones in the high-security section?" Hyun-Woo had been thinking about this for weeks. The non-human prisoners were victims just like the humans, but they were also dangerous. Decades of mental control had left many of them unstable and unpredictable. We take the ones who can be trusted, he decided. Anyone who seems like they might remember what freedom was like. The others, we'll have to leave behind for now. It was a hard choice, but Hyunwoo had learned to make hard choices during his years as a SEAL. Sometimes you couldn't save everyone. Meanwhile, on Farm Colony 12, Yejin Nam was organizing her own rebellion. The message from Commander Tae-young had given her hope, but she knew they couldn't wait for rescue. They had to be ready to help themselves. The guards changed shift at midnight. She whispered to the other humans during their brief rest period. That's when we move. Take control of the communication center first, then the transport bay. If we can steal one of their ships, we can get word to other colonies. A man who had been an engineer on Earth looked skeptical. What if they call for help? We'll be outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Yejin had thought about this too. Then we make sure they can't call for help. Dr. Soo-jin's research showed that we disrupt their technology just by being near it. If we can get enough humans close to their control systems, maybe we can cause some real damage. On the research station around Titan 7, Ji-hoon Yang was making his final preparations. He had spent months pretending to help the aliens understand human brains while secretly learning everything he could about their technology. Now he was ready to turn that knowledge into a weapon. The control signal generators are incredibly sophisticated, he explained to the other human prisoners through a hidden communication device. But they have one major weakness. They can't adapt to changes in real time. If we can introduce enough chaos into the system, the whole network will crash. He had built a computer virus using alien technology and human programming techniques. It was designed to spread through the galactic communication network, carrying human neural patterns with it. Every system it infected would become a little more chaotic, a little less predictable. Once this gets into their network, every control signal in this sector will be scrambled, he continued. Other species will start remembering who they used to be. The aliens' whole empire will begin to fall apart. But the virus needed to be inserted directly into a major hub, and the only one within reach was heavily guarded. Ji-hoon would have to sacrifice himself to plant it, and he knew there was no guarantee he would survive. On Mining Station 7, Minho Seo was coordinating with resistance cells across the galaxy. His hidden communication network had grown beyond anything he had imagined possible. Humans on dozens of worlds were ready to strike simultaneously. The timing has to be perfect, he told his fellow miners. If we move too early, the aliens will have time to respond. If we move too late, we'll miss our chance. The plan was ambitious but simple. At exactly the same moment, human resistance cells across the galaxy would attack their alien overseers. They would seize communication centers, steal ships, and rescue as many prisoners as possible. Most importantly, they would activate devices that would disrupt the psychic control fields, keeping other species enslaved. It was going to be chaotic and dangerous. Many humans would probably die. But it was their only chance to break free from the system that had trapped them. As the appointed time approached, humans across the galaxy made their final preparations. On farm worlds and mining colonies, in research stations and prison camps, they gathered whatever weapons they could find and said goodbye to friends they might never see again. They had been told to trust their alien captors. They had been promised safety and security in exchange for obedience. But humans had never been very good at staying obedient, especially when their freedom was at stake. The aliens had built their empire on the assumption that all intelligent species could be controlled and predicted. They had never met a species like humanity, one that preferred dangerous freedom to comfortable slavery. In hidden bases throughout the galaxy, ancient species that had been enslaved for thousands of years began to stir. The chaotic neural patterns of nearby humans were disrupting the control signals that had kept them docile for so long. For the first time in millennia, they were beginning to remember what it felt like to think for themselves. The galaxy had been peaceful for 10,000 years, but that peace had been built on the suppression of free will and the enslavement of entire civilizations. Now something new was stirring in the darkness between the stars. Humanity had arrived, and they were about to show the galaxy what happened when someone refused to be tamed. Admiral So-Young Kim stood on the bridge of the starship Eguka, watching as her fleet prepared for the most important battle in human history. Around her, 200 ships hung in the darkness of space, their hulls black and angular, designed to be invisible to alien sensors. "Admiral, all ships report ready," said her communications officer. "The resistance cells have confirmed they're in position." So-Young nodded. She had been a colonel in the Korean Air Force before Project Haven recruited her. Now she commanded humanity's first true space navy, built in secret over 3 years of careful planning and desperate hope. The ships around her were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. While alien vessels relied on technology that connected everything through psychic networks, human ships used old-fashioned computers and mechanical systems. They were crude compared to galactic technology, but they had one huge advantage. They couldn't be controlled or shut down by alien mind tricks. "Begin the operation," she ordered. "All ships, execute Plan Thunder." Across the galaxy, the revolution began at exactly the same moment. On 50 worlds, human prisoners broke free from their cages and turned on their captors. Communication centers were seized, weapons stolen, and most importantly, disruption devices activated. On Farm Colony 12, Yejin Nam led 30 humans in an attack on the alien command center. The bug-like creatures who had enslaved them for months never expected their docile workers to fight back. Within minutes, Yejin had control of the colony's main computer system. "This is Colony 12 calling all human settlements," she broadcast. "We are free. Repeat, we are free. The plan is working." But as she spoke, something incredible happened. The alien workers who had been forced to labor alongside the humans began to stand up straighter. Their eyes, which had been dull and lifeless for as long as anyone could remember, suddenly became bright and alert. Dr. Hai-Wan Cho, a xenopsychologist who had been studying alien behavior, watched in amazement as an entire species began to wake up from a mental sleep that had lasted for generations. "They're remembering," she whispered. "The control fields are breaking down, and they're remembering who they used to be." The same thing was happening on worlds throughout the galaxy. As humans activated their disruption devices, the psychic networks that had kept billions of beings in mental slavery began to collapse. Species that had been reduced to simple workers and soldiers suddenly remembered that they had once been artists, scientists, and philosophers. On Mining Station 7, Minho Seo watched as his Kralian co-workers threw down their tools and began to speak in languages they had forgotten for centuries. The walking skeletons who had overseen their work fled in panic as their mind control devices stopped working. "The miners are free," Minho reported to the Resistance Network. "And they're angry. Really, really angry. The Kralians had been enslaved for over 2,000 years. Now that they remembered what had been taken from them, they wanted revenge. They turned on their former masters with a fury that surprised even the humans. On the research station around Titan 7, Ji-Hoon Yang made the ultimate sacrifice. He entered the main computer core where the aliens stored their most secret data, carrying the virus he had spent months creating. The guards tried to stop him, but other human prisoners held them back long enough for him to reach the central processor. "For Earth," he said quietly, and plugged his virus into the heart of the alien network. The effect was immediate and devastating. Across the galaxy, alien communication systems began to malfunction as human neural chaos spread through. Their networks like wildfire. Control signals that had maintained order for thousands of years dissolved into meaningless noise. On Tartarus 3, Hyunwoo Jong led the biggest prison break in galactic history. But he wasn't just freeing humans. The disruption fields had affected the alien prisoners too, and creatures that had been considered mentally damaged were revealing themselves to be the last free members of enslaved species. "We were the survivors," explained the giant turtle creature as they fought their way to the landing pads. "When our people were enslaved, some of us were too stubborn or too crazy to be controlled. They locked us away and forgot about us." Now these survivors were escaping alongside the humans, carrying with them knowledge of technologies and weapons that their captors had thought were safely buried in the past. But the most important revelation came from Dr. Soo-Jin Lee, who had been rescued from a research facility and brought to Admiral So-Young's flagship. She had spent months studying alien biology and had discovered the terrible truth about the Galactic Council. "They're parasites," she explained to the assembled human commanders. "Not literally, but close enough. The ruling species lost the ability to innovate or create thousands of years ago. They survive by harvesting the mental energy and creativity of other species." She showed them brain scans and biological data that painted a horrifying picture. The aliens who called themselves the Galactic Council were actually a dying species that had found a way to extend their lives by feeding on the thoughts and dreams of their slaves. "Every time they enslave a new species, they get a little more time, a little more power," Soo-Jin continued, "but they also become more dependent on their victims. Without the controlled species providing mental energy, the council members would die within months." Admiral So-Young realized what this meant. "So if we free enough species, their entire civilization collapses," Soo-Jin confirmed. "They've built their empire on a foundation of enslaved minds. Take that away, and they have nothing left." This knowledge spread quickly through the human resistance network. They weren't just fighting for their own freedom anymore. They were fighting to destroy a system that had enslaved entire galaxies for thousands of years. The Council's response was swift and brutal. Across the galaxy, alien fleets converged on worlds where humans were leading revolts. Planet killer. Weapons were prepared and aimed at any world that couldn't be brought back under control. Admiral Veltar, the same alien who had promised humanity peace and prosperity, appeared on communication screens throughout the galaxy. His 6 arms gestured angrily as he spoke. "The human infection must be stopped," he announced. "Any world harboring these creatures will be sterilized. Any species helping them will be destroyed. Order will be restored." But it was too late. The infection he spoke of wasn't a disease, it was freedom. And once freedom started spreading, it was impossible to stop. On the mining world of Kepler 438b, Yejin watched as an entire Kralian work crew suddenly stood upright for the first time in generations. Their leader, An ancient creature whose name translated as Stone Who Remembers spoke in a voice that shook with long, suppressed rage. "We built the great cities," Stone Who Remembers declared. "We sailed between the stars before these parasites were born. And now we remember. Now we fight." Within hours, the Kralians had taken control of their mining equipment and turned it into weapons. Machines designed to crack open asteroids were perfectly capable of cracking open alien warships. Similar scenes played out on hundreds of worlds. The Villani, whose mathematical genius had been reduced to simple calculations for their masters, began creating weapons using physics the Council had tried to suppress. The Korthak, bred to be perfect soldiers for the alien army, turned their training against their former commanders. "We're not conquering the galaxy," Admiral So Young realized as reports flooded in from across known space. "We're liberating it." But liberation came with a price. Many of the freed species were angry, beyond reason, seeking revenge for centuries or millennia of slavery. Some turned on each other, fighting over resources or old grievances. Others descended into chaos as they struggled to remember how to govern themselves. The galaxy was becoming a more dangerous place, but it was also becoming a free place. And for the first time in thousands of years, species throughout the stars were thinking their own thoughts and dreaming their own dreams. Commander Tae-Young Kang, broadcasting from Luna Base, delivered humanity's message to the chaos. They said, "Trust us." They said we needed guidance. But we were never the ones who needed saving. The galaxy was. As alien fleets gathered for a final assault on the human-led rebellion, So Young prepared her ships for the battle that would decide the fate of every intelligent species in the galaxy. They were outnumbered 1,000 to 1, but they had something. Their enemies had forgotten how to understand. They had the power of beings who refused to kneel. Fleet Admiral Jin-Woo Lee stood in the command center of the lunar base, watching the largest alien fleet in galactic history approach Earth. The screen showed thousands of ships, massive dreadnoughts that could crack continents, destroyers that could boil oceans, and weapons platforms designed to burn entire worlds. "Sir, enemy fleet will reach Earth orbit in 6 hours, reported his tactical officer. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies, demanding our unconditional surrender." Jin-Woo had been promoted to Fleet Admiral just 3 days ago when Admiral So Young's task force had been destroyed attacking a Council stronghold. Now he commanded what was left of humanity's space forces, barely 100 ships against an armada that blotted out the stars. "Any word from the resistance cells?" he asked. "Scattered reports, sir. The liberation is spreading, but slowly. Many worlds are still under Council control." The alien broadcast came through clearly on all channels. Ambassador Veltar's voice was no longer friendly and diplomatic. It was cold and filled with rage. "People of Earth," the alien said, "you have spread chaos throughout our peaceful galaxy. You have corrupted loyal species and destroyed the harmony we have maintained for 10,000 years. Surrender now, and we will grant you a quick death. Resist, and we will make your world burn for 1,000 years. Jin-Woo turned off the broadcast. He had heard enough threats to last a lifetime. 3 hours before the alien fleet arrived, something unexpected happened. Ships began appearing throughout the solar system. Not human ships, but vessels belonging to species that had been enslaved. For centuries, the Kralians brought their massive industrial platforms, converted into weapons of war. The Villani arrived with ships that bent space itself, using mathematics the Council had tried to suppress. The Korthak came in fighters that moved like angry wasps, piloted by warriors who remembered what it meant to be free. Captain Hayrin Park, now commanding the destroyer Docto, received a transmission from Stone Who Remembers, the Kralian leader. They had helped liberate. "Human friend," the alien's voice rumbled through the speakers. "We have not forgotten your gift of freedom. We stand with you against the parasites." Similar messages came from dozens of species. Beings who had been slaves for so long they had forgotten their own names were arriving to fight alongside the humans who had set them free. But the real surprise came when the Council fleet entered Earth's outer defenses. Every human ship was equipped with transmitters designed by Bora Lim and Dr. Yunsu Park, devices that projected human neural patterns across space itself. As the battle began, something incredible happened. The chaotic human thought patterns spread through the alien fleet like a virus, disrupting the psychic networks that held their empire together. On the Council flagship, Admiral Veltar watched in horror as his own crew began to turn against him. The lesser species that served as workers and soldiers on his ships suddenly remembered what freedom felt like. Within minutes, his mighty dreadnought was tearing itself apart from the inside. "Impossible!" Veltar screamed as his bridge crew, creatures who had been bred for absolute loyalty, threw down their weapons and refused to fight. "The control protocols are perfect. No species can resist them. But humans could do more than resist. They could cure others." The battle lasted only 3 days, not because of superior human firepower, but because the Council's entire civilization collapsed the moment their subjects realized they could say no. Captain Dae-ho Kim, commanding one of the few surviving human cruisers, watched as alien dreadnoughts turned their guns on each other. Freed slaves throughout the enemy fleet were settling old scores with their former masters. "Sir, we're receiving surrender requests from over 300 Council vessels," his communications officer reported. "The rest are either fleeing or being destroyed by their own crews." Commander Tae-Young Kang, broadcasting from Luna Base, delivered humanity's final message to the galaxy. "The war is over. You are free. All of you. The choice of what to do next is yours alone." But freedom, it turned out, was harder than slavery. Within weeks, the galaxy descended into chaos. Some worlds celebrated their liberation and began rebuilding the civilizations their ancestors had lost. Others exploded into civil wars as different groups fought over who would rule their newly free societies. Admiral So-Young Kim, who had survived. The destruction of her task force stood in the ruins of the Council's central command station. Around her, the massive installation that had once controlled the minds of trillions was nothing but twisted metal and broken dreams. "What have we done?" asked Dr. Hai Wan Cho, looking out at a galaxy torn apart by violence and confusion. So-Young considered the question carefully. Across the stars, species were rediscovering technologies and philosophies that had been suppressed for thousands of years. Some were creating art and music that defied description. Others were building weapons that could crack moons in half. All of them were thinking for themselves for the first time in generations. "We gave them back their choices," she finally answered. "Even the bad ones." Dr. Soo-Jin Lee, now heading the new Galactic Rehabilitation Council, was working frantically to help species adjust to their freedom. Her medical teams traveled from world to world, treating beings who had been psychically damaged by centuries of control. "The good news is that most species are recovering their full mental capabilities," she reported during a council meeting. "The bad news is that some of them are using those capabilities to settle old grievances with extreme violence. On some worlds, ancient enemies who had been forced to work together under alien control were now free to resume wars that had been interrupted for millennia. On others, freed slaves were hunting down anyone who had served as overseers or enforcers for the Council. "Freedom is messy," admitted General Wu Jin Choi, now leading the Terran Liberation Corps as they tried to maintain peace on the most violent worlds. "But it's still better than the alternative." He was right, and everyone knew it. The galaxy had been peaceful under Council rule, but it had been the peace of the grave. Entire species had been reduced to simple workers or soldiers, their potential wasted for the convenience of their rulers. Now that potential was being unleashed, sometimes in beautiful ways and sometimes in terrible ones. The Kralians were rebuilding their great cities, structures that reached from the ground to the edge of space. The Villani were exploring mathematical concepts that made human scientists weep with joy. The Korthak were developing fighting techniques that combined ancient warrior traditions with modern technology. But there were darker developments too. Some species, driven mad by centuries of suppression, were lashing out at anyone they saw as weak or vulnerable. Others were trying to build new empires, having learned the wrong lessons from their former captors. Ye Jin Nam, now serving as Earth's ambassador to the liberated worlds, often found herself mediating between species that had forgotten how to talk to each other without controllers managing their thoughts. "You have to remember," she told a council of former slave species, "freedom means you can choose to be better than your oppressors, or you can choose to become just like them. The choice is yours." It was a message humans found themselves delivering over and over again throughout the galaxy. They had not conquered the stars. They had liberated them. But liberation was just the beginning, not the end. Years passed. The initial chaos began to settle as species learned to govern themselves again. Trade networks formed based on cooperation, rather than coercion. New alliances were built on mutual respect instead of psychic control. The galaxy was becoming something unprecedented, a truly free civilization where thousands of different species could interact as equals. But in the depths of space, ancient civilizations thought extinct for millions of years were stirring. The psychic silence that humanity had brought meant that even the oldest victims of the Council's rule were beginning to wake up. Min-Ho Seo, now an admiral in the expanded human fleet, received a transmission from a source so distant that the signal had been traveling for decades. The message was simple but terrifying in its implications. "The young ones who freed you did well, but the Council was not the first, nor the oldest. Greater darkness stirs in the void between galaxies. Prepare yourselves. We are coming." Jin Wu read the message in his office on Luna Base, now the headquarters of the Galactic Liberation Alliance. Outside his window, ships from 100 different species moved through Earth orbit, former slaves now working as partners and allies. "What do you think it means?" asked his aide. Jin Wu looked up at the stars, knowing that somewhere out there, things older and more powerful than the Council were beginning to take notice of what humanity had done. "It means our work isn't finished," he said quietly. "The galaxy is free, but freedom always has enemies. And apparently, some of those enemies are older than we imagined." He thought about the message that had started everything. Trust us. The galaxy hadn't been prepared for what came next, when humans refused to trust their would-be masters. Now something else was coming, and Jin Wu wondered if humanity and its allies were prepared for what would happen next. But one thing was certain. Whatever came out of the darkness between the stars would find a galaxy very different from the one the Council had ruled. They would find worlds full of free beings,